What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 30 of Godzillatober. Wow. What a ride. We're into the last week. If you haven't seen any previous episodes, please go check them out. If you have a favorite Godzilla film, go check that out. I really appreciate your guys' viewership. Let's push hard through to the finale. And this has been an incredible project. It's been challenging, it's been enjoyable, so thank you so much for watching with me. Episode 30 is Godzilla 2014. This is the second time the Americans have taken a crack at their own Godzilla, and this time, arguably more successful than 98. It launched the MonsterVerse, and in that sense, it's been a massive success because those movies have gone on to get better and better, and a bigger world. There's other movies, there's TV show tie-ins, video games. The MonsterVerse has been a huge success. So in that regard alone, you have to think that the 2014 Godzilla is a much bigger success than 98 because it just spawned so many other properties. But as for the movie itself, let's go.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Jared Fearing.
I'm a lifelong Godzilla fan and a big fan of Halloween.
And nothing says Halloween like monster movies.
So this year, for the month of October,
we're going to review every single Godzilla movie from Gojira all the way to Godzilla and Kong the New Empire.
So join me this month for a new video every single day and see if I go insane in the process. Let's get to it. Godzilla 2014 really wanted to make this a new franchise, and they wanted to do it in a big way. And so this movie has been stuffed to the gills with A-list actors. You've got Bryan Cranston, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Sally Hawkins, it's Elizabeth Olsen. It's just a huge cast. And, I respect the fact that they wanted to get A-list celebrities to be in this and set forth on a franchise the right way, done well with high-level acting and high-level special effects. And the downside of this movie is maybe that none of those actors really get used to the full effect, with the exception of Bryan Cranston. The movie opens exactly the same as Godzilla 98, actually, with a bit of a musical score and flashbacks about the creation of Godzilla, except here it's less about the creation of Godzilla and more about the discovery of Godzilla, showing archival footage of the constant attempts to kill Godzilla over the years. It's pretty cool, especially now watching it in 2024, that we've got the Monarch series that kind of fleshes out some of those scenes a little bit better. So it's come together full circle really nicely. The movie opens with a younger Bryan Cranston working at a nuclear plant in Janjira, Japan. It's very arguable that the stuff with Bryan Cranston is the best part of the movie. I certainly think so. He is, all movies considered, I think he's the best actor to appear in a Godzilla movie. He absolutely kills it in the time that he's in this film, and they do manage to use Bryan Cranston to his full effect and range of abilities. It was a great decision to have him come on. The opening scene where Bryan Cranston has to seal his wife away to stop from a radiation leak and thus killing her is incredible. It's probably the most emotional thing in any of the Godzilla movies, maybe with the exception of some of the stuff we'll see later on in -1. It's a moment of great acting and great emotional weight, and I really love that opening. The opening of this movie is very, very good. 10 out of 10 opening. We jump ahead 15 years, and that's when we introduce adult Aaron Taylor-Johnson. And Aaron Taylor-Johnson is a very good actor, but he's kind of wasted in this movie. We'll talk more about that in a few moments. Back to Bryan Cranston. Bryan Cranston now is an old man who has been researching into what he believes is a cover-up all these years. He doesn't believe it was an earthquake that caused a nuclear situation. He believes that there was something else, and his apartment is plastered with all kinds of papers like a psychopath. different things being chained together, and he's clearly been researching the conspiracy. Bryan Cranston gets arrested for snooping around the restricted zone. Modern day Japan has a restricted zone around where the original nuclear meltdown happened, and they have people patrolling the area, and nobody's allowed in, and Bryan Cranston keeps trying to sneak in, and he was able to drop some sensors in the river around there, and he's able to pick up that the same kind of vibrations that were happening in the original incident that caused a meltdown that killed his wife are happening again. He goes a little bit crazy, gets arrested by the police, and his son, Aaron Taylor Johnson, has to fly down to Japan to free him from prison. While he's there, immediately Bryan Cranston convinces him to sneak back into the restricted zone with him, under the idea that for sure this is not an earthquake, there's something else going on. And of course there is. They find that they have the Muto egg there, and it's about to hatch. We're introduced to the Muto egg right away, and Ken Watanabe as Dr. Serizawa is an incredible casting. That's a very, very good decision. However, much like Aaron Taylor Johnson, I feel like Ken Watanabe is really wasted in this movie. I think that they had so much star power, but they didn't really have that many star roles. In fact, I would argue, aside from Bryan Cranston, there's really no human roles that stand out at all in this movie. Thankfully, we see Ken Watanabe again in Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is the next one in the legendary franchise. The Muto egg hatches, and Bryan Cranston is fatally wounded in the accident, and about a half hour into the movie, or 40 minutes or so, Bryan Cranston's character passes away. It sucks because at this point in the movie, it goes from being an incredible experience. They've got a great mystery built up, Bryan Cranston delivering one hell of a performance, and then it shifts the focus pretty much exclusively to Aaron Taylor Johnson, who is given like nothing to work with in this movie acting-wise. The Muto, which is gigantic at this point, is on the search for radiation and for a mate, and it's out in the world now, and you can't hide monsters anymore because it's gigantic and they're really failing to contain this thing. Aaron Taylor Johnson, after his father Bryan Cranston dies, he is taken by a military helicopter to get a commercial flight in Hawaii, and of course that is where the Muto has landed, and also where Godzilla is first introduced. And so once Bryan Cranston dies, the movie is no longer a mystery, and it becomes kind of, people online have joked, it's like Aaron Taylor Johnson starring in Where Is My Wife, also featuring Godzilla, and that sums it up pretty well. After Bryan Cranston's character dies, the story's kind of over. It becomes just like a connecting sequences of like, when are we getting back to Godzilla at this point? First time we see Godzilla in Hawaii, the introduction to him is incredible. The effects look great. This is the first Godzilla that is pure CGI. We've never had one before that has never at least had like a partial practical effect. And I know a lot of people are going to immediately jump to 98 being CGI, but for that film, they actually had a lot of practical effects on set. They had different things for the actors to look at, for appropriate eye lines and whatnot, and they actually built that giant Godzilla head you see at the end of the movie. But again, enough about 98, we're focusing on this one. This movie is just pure CGI, but thankfully, this came out in 2014, and they did not skimp on the budget, and it looks amazing. It's a big, big difference between seeing what the American budget of CGI can do versus the Japanese budget of what CGI can do. And you know, it's not exactly a fair comparison because this came out in 2014, and all the Millennium series of the Japanese ones came out, the last one, Final Wars, in 2004. So you can't really compare them, but it's good to see that the CGI is incredible in these MonsterVerse films. They've really spared no expense in the CGI department. Godzilla looks fantastic. In terms of the story, there's really not that much to say. Once Godzilla arrives, he's kind of just chasing the Mutos the whole time. There's two of them now. There's one flying, and then there's one that's trying to lay eggs. Aaron Taylor Johnson is, like I said, the internet joked, Where's My Wife? That's the movie. He's like trying to get back to his family, and they're kind of caught up in the monsters striking their city. And so story-wise, it's like very bare bones, honestly. And near the end of the movie, they try to use a nuke to lure the creatures, but one of the Mutos gets the nuke, uses it to build a nest, and then it becomes like the military has to stop this nuke from going off. Because it's located in the heart of a city, San Francisco, and they're trying not to, blow up San Francisco. So the monsters kind of become priority B, and it becomes like a bomb disposal thing. I don't know. It's okay. It's just like, the biggest fault of this movie is that it starts out so strong, and then the middle section is quite boring. There's a few good monster scenes, but largely I'm like, all right, let's move it along here. Like, let's get to something good. When they go to get the nuke from the Muto nest, they have to do a heli jump, and they jump out of this plane way above the clouds, and it's a visually stunning scene. It's really great. And I remember that in the lead up to this movie, they advertised that a lot because it was so cool. And I remember seeing trailers for this movie in the theater. The marketing surrounding this movie was really good, and I had a lot of hype for it. And in the visual department, the movie doesn't disappoint at all. There's some very, very good scenes, very cool looking settings. There's a lot of great things to love about this movie visually. The modern Godzilla design takes influences from like bears and eagles, and obviously the classic design as well. And I love the modern Godzilla. I think they nailed it. I think it's really, really good. And it looks awesome in this movie. For the next ones, there's some minor changes, but this is generally the new Godzilla that we've kind of got throughout the MonsterVerse franchise. The Mutos, on the other hand, I find incredibly boring. It's not particularly that they look bad, but it's basically like they sat down and they were like, hey, remember Cloverfield? What if the Cloverfield monster was also crossbred with Mothra? That's kind of what I feel like is happening here. It's like an insect version of the Cloverfield monster, and I already don't really love the Cloverfield monster design. It's all right. I like it. Cloverfield's a great movie. I really like that movie. But the design of the monster is And I kind of feel the same thing with the Mutos here. The design is not very good, but they look really good, and their scenes are okay. The final battle is pretty good. The Godzilla combat really improves as the movies kind of go on in the MonsterVerse, but the final battle here is pretty good. There's some cool moments. Godzilla kills one of the Mutos by whacking it with his tail, which is something we've seen in the other films. And then one of the coolest on-film monster deaths is the other large Muto. Godzilla grabs it by the mouth and shoots his atomic breath into its head that essentially is so powerful it burns its head off and decapitates it, and we get Godzilla standing there roaring, holding the off head of the Muto. It's an awesome scene. So this is kind of a weird movie because there's a lot of things that are really awesome in it, and then there's a lot of stuff that it's like, oh, I wish this was better, I wish this was better, but it's definitely not a bad movie. That being said, I'm going to recommend it. I'm not going to highly recommend it though, because especially knowing what's available to watch in the MonsterVerse, you can kind of jump into almost any of them and know what's going on. You don't necessarily need to see this first one, but of course it's good. It sets up Monarch as an agency that is a very important part of the MonsterVerse. They give us a brief backstory on Godzilla. There's a lot of reasons to watch this one, but I do feel that aside from the Godzilla scenes, it's a real like drag and bummer and boring to get through. It's just kind of boring. I'm sorry, I don't want it to be boring, but it's just kind of boring. The actual Godzilla scenes from his introduction to the final battle, those are really good, and I really like those. I don't think that my opinion is really that wild on this movie. I think a lot of people kind of feel the same thing, in that the Godzilla scenes are excellent, but that the rest of it is kind of boring. And I feel bad that Bryan Cranston does such a good acting job right at the start of the movie, and then it's all kind of downhill from there, because he does like a really killer job in the time that he's in this film. And the movie cost about $160 million to make, and it went on to make over $500 million and launch the MonsterVerse franchise. So it was a success as much as it needed to be. The next film in our franchise, though, actually goes back to Japan for one of the most unique in the entire franchise. It's Shin Gojira, and I am really excited to talk about this one. I will see you next time for Shin Gojira.